Now I want to introduce Pei, our treasurer. I normally introduce the speaker, but Pei knows Robert and she's worked with Robert, and she asked for the opportunity to introduce him to you. So please welcome our wonderful treasurer, Pei.
So good evening. Tonight we're delighted and honored to have Dr. Robert Gilbert as our special guest speaker. Dr. Gilbert is the founder and director of the Vesica Institute for Holistic Studies, based in Asheville, North Carolina. He received his PhD in International Studies, and before that, he was a U.S. Marine Corps instructor in nuclear, biological, chemical warfare survival. Dr. Gilbert has studied multiple world spiritual traditions extensively, including over 25 years in the original European Rosicrucian and Holy Grail traditions. Dr. Gilbert has studied biogeometry under Dr. Ibrahim Karim from Egypt. He became the first non-Egyptian instructor for biogeometry and worked with Dr. Karim to develop the standardized teaching material for their foundation and advanced classes. He's a brilliant researcher and a great teacher. He has a remarkable ability to sift through huge amounts of information from multiple spiritual and scientific sources and explain them in a simple and logical way. He truly unites spirit and science into a new and holistic study. The first time I met Dr. Gilbert was at FMBR workshop back in 2010. I was deeply impressed by his knowledge and his teaching style, and I followed him to Asheville to take the Biogeometry Foundation and advanced classes. I simply couldn't get enough of his teaching. Therefore, I'm so glad that this time he's coming to California to teach. And I'm looking forward to hearing his insights into vibrational science research. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Robert Gilbert.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your coming tonight. And I created a color handout for you for tonight's talk. And it's actually the front page of the handout that you received. So tonight's talk is about vibrational healing and activation. And there's some pictures here that are going to be relevant to our conversation, as well as breaking down the major topics I'll be talking about tonight in the text on this front page. Now, this is also going to be the general overview of what the weekend workshop is going to be. For those of you that have trained with me before, you know there's a tremendous amount of information packed into the hours, so the weekend workshop is probably going to be the normal equivalent of about a 4-day workshop in 2 days. So to give you an overview of that here in 90 minutes is going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to do my best to hit some of the highlights in the talk tonight and share with you some of the information I've found from traditions around the world. On the back page was the talk that I just gave and the weekend seminar I just gave in Sacramento, California, to a group there on spiritual initiation practices and systems of the East and West. And what I want to clarify is that the work that I do at the Vesica Institute has 2 parts to it. If you're familiar with the image of the Vesica, The Vesica is two overlapping circles that create an almond shape between the two. The two circles are two complementary polarities. And when two complementary polarities overlap, the place that they overlap becomes a merging, a meeting ground, a gateway that brings the best of both parts together. And so at the Vesica Institute, those two complementary polarities are spiritual science, which we just did in Sacramento, and vibrational science, which we're doing here. The spiritual science is primarily focused on the cumulative knowledge and practices for human spiritual and consciousness development of traditions all over the world. The vibrational science has to do with the work with energy, and how this work with energy, again from many different traditions around the world, can be a support for all of our spiritual and consciousness development. The two always merge together, and in classical traditions all over the world, they always used vibrational methods not only for healing, but for higher level spiritual activations as well. From the perspective of many classical traditions, healing is the first stage. Healing is simply the act of becoming whole and coherent enough to be able to do the more advanced work, to transform oneself permanently. And this has to do, as we described in the Sacramento course that just ended, with creating new structures in the human subtle body. The structures in the human subtle body are the only thing we will take with us through the gate of death. They're the only things that permanently become part of us. So the vibrational work has always been a support to this. So when we talk about this tonight, we're going to talk about this universal vibrational science. We're going to talk about the demonstration of vibrational forces through cymatics work, and then about the classical and modern use of anchors of specific vibrations through the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, and animal kingdom. Then in the interior of your 4-page color handout, I may be referring a few times tonight to this particular course, Vibrational Testing and Healing. The Vibrational Testing and Healing is an online course that I developed that goes into more detail to teach people step by step how to do some of the things I'll be talking about tonight. At the bottom of that page are some more illustrations relevant to the cymatics discussion that we'll have tonight. And then on the opposite page is simply a listing of upcoming live classes and then of the other online classes we have other than the vibrational testing and healing. Along with this, there was also a flyer for a 50% discount on the online classes, because to be very honest with you, I rarely teach live classes anymore. Most of my time is going into research and into teaching online classes. So when people do make the effort to show up, and I know in this area some of you made a long drive tonight, I want to give you a thank you with the discount that'll last for the next week if you want to sign up for the online classes. So get back whatever investment you put into coming to the talk tonight. And again, thank you for making the effort to come to a live course. I appreciate that. So what we want to start with is what I mentioned here on the front page of your handout with the universal vibrational spectrum. So when I began to work with vibrational teachings and methods of different traditions all over the world, which I was able to focus on during the 12 years that I spent at the university getting my doctorate in international studies, there's always a challenge because different traditions will look at the vibrational realities around us, the vibrations that affect human consciousness, that affect our thoughts, our feelings, as well as our energy system every moment of every day. They'll analyze these through different methods. There's a concept that I refer to as the number prism, that to understand any phenomena, what we do in a modern scientific approach is we divide it into its component parts. And so what you'll find in India, for example, to understand healing vibrations, they tend to divide them into 3 different parts. And they'll talk about the 3 gunas. They'll talk about vata and pitta and kapha. These are 3-fold division. In the West, there'd often be a 4-fold division of the 4 elements. In China, a 5-fold division of the 5 elements. But there was an interesting statement by the great Rosicrucian teacher Rudolf Steiner, where he said to fully understand any system in the world and to be able to differentiate out every one of its core aspects requires at minimum a 12-fold division. This is a classical teaching from great spiritual and healing traditions in the world, That's why there are 12 disciples around the Christ, why there are 12 imams in Shia Islam, while there are a division of the stars into 12 signs of the zodiac around the sun. It's 12 around the one. For those of you that know sacred geometry, and you look at how a cube is structured, a cube is the form that gives rise to matter. The cube has 12 lines that define the cube. If you look at a sphere, you can fit exactly 12 spheres around a central sphere. Again, 12 around the one. And so when I was doing this work to be able to understand all these different world systems and put them into a common unified system, I was looking for a method to be able to differentiate out the 12 core aspects within vital energy. So to lead to the discussion directly of this, I want to give a frame of reference of what we have done to create modern technology. Because sometimes we take for granted that we live in an age of technological miracles. We just are so exposed to it every day, we don't think about it anymore. But the world has been completely transformed in the last 100 years through discoveries that have taken place over the last 150 years. Now, what I'm referring to here is that to have a science, you need to be able to differentiate any aspect of things into its component parts. You need to have a spectrum, what we would call spectrum analysis. So one of the first breakthroughs that we had was the identification of every type of matter that exists in the physical world. In the ancient world, you never had that. So we live in a material world, but we didn't know what all the different pieces of matter were until the latter part of the 1800s with the identification of the periodic table of elements. What we call the periodic table of elements is really the identification of the complete spectrum of matter itself. Now we can be fully conscious of everything that makes up the physical world. That opened up everything in material science for all of our modern technology. But then there was another breakthrough that took place in the late 1800s and then was finalized in the year 1932. And that was identifying the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy. Because until 1932, with the identification of microwaves, we didn't have an understanding of the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energies. So what you find in many classical traditions is that they will talk about different levels of creation. So there's the physical level, there's the etheric life energy level, that in China would be called qi, or in Japan would be called ki, or in India would be called prana. The Greeks would call it the ether. So this etheric vital force energy is above that of the physical. Then there are consciousness levels, beginning with what we call in the West the astral level. Well, with all these different levels, we have to understand a progression that is taking place in modern science. And to do that, I think it's very helpful to review a particular concept coming from Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner mentioned at one time that people don't properly understand what electromagnetic energy is, because time and time again, in subtle energy research in modern times, things dealing with etheric life force, with qi, we try to get validity from modern science by saying the vital life force is electromagnetic. But in fact, according to Steiner, electromagnetic energy is not the vital life force. If it was, you could plug the base of your spine into an electrical outlet and get charged up. But it doesn't work that way. In fact, as we'll describe later tonight, there's a vibrational component in electromagnetic energy that is extremely toxic. And that's why people get electrosensitivity and have detrimental effects from electrical fields. So what he mentions is that what the vital life force is, that's above the level of the physical, in every classical tradition, they understood that this vital life force is what went into the physical and animated it. It's the animating power. So when we understand that, we'll understand that when that power has animated the physical body through what the Chinese call the universal qi field, or what the Greeks would call the ether, that animation process creates resistance passing through the conductor of the human body, passing through the conductor of physical materials, and that means that this faster than light energy slows way down. And this particular energy from the ether begins to decay. The decay of the etheric energy, of the vital force energy, is what we call electromagnetic energy. That's why Nikola Tesla, in his work, said, well, today in technology, we worked with retarded Hertzian waves that are slower than light. But Tesla, in the 1890s, said there's another type of wave. scalar waves that are faster than light. And that's the real thing behind the electromagnetic energy. So for what I'm about to describe to you, the concept is then that our electromagnetic energy is in fact decayed life force. It's the decayed vital energy that animates living beings. But it became a shadow substance in electromagnetic energy. Now it becomes gross enough, it becomes dense enough that we can use it to do things like turn a physical motor and create our modern technology. Hard to do that with the ether. You can animate a living being. And it's said that some traditions have been able to harness the ether to be able to turn motors. And there's a lot of work going on in this field today in things like the Tesla Society. But that gross level of the energy and electromagnetic energy is what we use in modern technology. But here's the problem, that when we have the mastery of the electromagnetic spectrum and of the spectrum of matter, the periodic table, all of our technology today is based on how we stick this electromagnetic energy into specific pieces of physical matter, into silicon doped with germanium or whatever it might be, to hold a specific frequency. But what they ignore is what about the next level up? Because after the electromagnetic, which Steiner would call sub-nature or sub-physical, and then the physical level, then you have the vital life force. We should be aware that every major spiritual tradition on the planet, every traditional culture until about 300 years ago, all over the world, always focused their healing on the vital life force. That's true in every culture. It's only a very modern development to focus only on the physical body and claim there is no vital life force. So since we looked at only the sub-physical and the physical for our modern technology, there was absolutely zero consideration given to the fact that these types of vibrations created by this technology are going to affect the vital life force level. So that vital life force level has got to come in to a new, more expanded scientific form of understanding. And again, we tend to try to understand it today through the number prism of the 3 gunas in Ayurveda, through the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, etc. But again, we can expand that into a spectrum that would include all of this phenomena together. Now, this is related to the work that I've done in the online training I mentioned, Vibrational Testing and Healing, and the second of the 3 courses is called the Universal Vibrational Spectrum. So, the discovery of this vibrational spectrum of all the subtle energies that are too subtle to be picked up by electromagnetic equipment began to take place in the 1930s in France. One of the major researchers was a radio wave engineer named Louis Turin. And Louis Turin had studied French radiesthesia, the method of being able to pick up subtle vibrations through the use of particular types of pendulums or other tools. Now, the difficulty we have today is that their method has almost nothing to do with what you see today with the use of pendulums and mental dowsing. It's a completely different method. In this work, they don't ask any mental questions. They don't program the pendulum mentally ahead of time for movement. Rather, the pendulums have particular types of angles or shapes built into them that resonate with a particular vibrational force, or they can be tuned to a series of different vibrations. Then, through the movement of the pendulum or other type of measurement tool, you'll then be able to perceive simply the presence or the absence of an invisible vibration that most people cannot perceive. Some people who are very sensitive energy healers or psychics may be able to perceive some of these energies. But what the tool allows you to do is then to pick up that vibratory force coming from any person, place, or thing. So with the work of Louis Turin as a radio wave engineer, he understood that there are all types of waves that are passing through us all the time that you'll have no idea even exist unless you have a tool to be able to detect it. So he knew from radio wave technology, radio waves are passing through things all the time. You don't know they're there until you use a crystal and you tune the crystal to pick up the broadcast. So using the concepts of the French radiesthesia, which I won't go into too much of the background tonight, but let's just say it goes back to ancient times, goes back to the ancient Egyptian temple science, goes back to the work of the Jesuits in the Catholic tradition. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is actually coming from writings of Jesuit-trained French priests who wrote in French in the early 1900s and who wrote books about this. Then came into France, was given out to the public as an actual method to detect subtle vibrations and then was taken further by people like Louis Turin. So as far as I'm concerned, this was a gigantic development in subtle energy work, to be able to differentiate the complete spectrum of all subtle energies into 12 parts. Now, when the French did this, and there were many people besides Turin that we won't talk about tonight, this then gave us a 12-fold spectrum that I have a picture for you on the front part of your handout tonight, with the color bands associated with it. Now, here's the thing. These 12 vibrations that make up the complete spectrum of subtle energy, the exact same way that the electromagnetic spectrum shows the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy, these energies were described for simplicity by the French in terms of colors. Because all of these subtle vibrations, they may be completely invisible, or that vibration can appear in any quality scale. What do I mean by a quality scale? A quality scale is shape, or sound, or movement, or angle, or color, or proportion. All of these are qualities. There are healers who use only light and color. There are healers who use only sound. There's healers that use only angles. There are healers that use only numbers. All of these are quality scales to express the complete spectrum of vibrational forces. Now, what happened is that with World War II, such tremendous chaos took place in Europe that this beginning of the movement of vibrational radiesthesia and the identification of the universal vibrational spectrum had permanent damage done to it. At the end of World War II, people were so concerned just with getting food to eat that things never really came back together again the way that they had begun to form in the 1930s. And in fact, a lot of this work was almost lost. One of the few people in North America that understood it well was a man named Christopher Hills. And those of you with a strong background in this know that Christopher Hills lived in Boulder Creek, California. He had a school called the University of the Trees, and he wrote a book called Supersensonics that you saw in every New Age bookstore in the 70s and 80s. Don't see it much today, but those of you from back in the day, you'll understand this book, Supersensonics. He knew about the French work. I was very fortunate when he died that his widow sold me his entire library of rare French radiesthesia texts. I then began a project to translate these texts into English. And so what I've been doing for years is to pull out core information from this. But I want to mention that how I found out about this in the first place was through my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Ibrahim Karim from Cairo, Egypt. So Dr. Karim built another system on top of the French identification of the vibrational spectrum. So when you work with Dr. Karim, he'll refer to this as physical radiesthesia. I usually use the term vibrational radiesthesia, which is another term the French use, but he'll use the term physical radiesthesia. What he means is that it's not mental dowsing, it's picking up invisible vibrations through the use of specific tools. Now with Dr. Karim's work, what he did is that he not only worked with the 12 bands of all the different powers or qualities of energy that exist with subtle energy, but he asked a very important question. In the French work, when you look at this particular spectrum, again, bear in mind that though it's expressed as color, color is only one way that invisible vibration could manifest. It could stay completely invisible to normal human senses, or it could manifest as a sound, as a shape, etc. That's why you see all of these medieval texts talking about correspondences. This sound equals this color, which equals this shape, which equals this string length, etc. So in the French work, they talked about the way that the 12 vibrations will form around the boundary of objects. You can actually test them there directly. And then certain people, places, things, shapes would manifest a very specific vibration. They called it the shape-caused wave. It's a vibratory wave that comes from a shape. Now, Dr. Karim did a tremendous amount of work with this because he's an architect. He wanted to understand exactly what vibratory forces am I getting from shapes and how do they affect living beings. But he did something else the French hadn't thought to do, a brilliant act of lateral thinking. And that is, just as you have the 12 bands of all the vibrations that appear on the perimeter of all objects, he asked, well, what's the energy in the center of everything? What's in the center of every chakra in the human body? What's in the center of every shape, of every form, of any material? And he was the first one to then be able to directly identify a very powerful and very profound vibratory quality that is what I refer to generically as the centering vibration. It is the energy found in the center of everything, and it at the same time has the function of centering and balancing all living energy systems. Dr. Karim calls it the Biogeometry 3, or for short, BG3, for this energy of the center, because he first did the work to identify 3 different components in it. For tonight, I'll just mention that what he talks about as the highest component in the center of everything, the center of every human chakra, the center of every cell in your body, in all of the major power spots on the planet Earth, any place on the Earth that a local tradition says this is our power spot, they all have a huge concentration, an unusual concentration of exactly this energy. So the center of everything, any form, if you draw a circle, it will appear at the moment you draw the circle in the center of the circle. Now that appears strange to us. We don't think about natural forces interacting with our creative activity in this way, but it does. As soon as you learn to detect these energies, you'll be able to create any shape or test any existing shape, whether in 2D or 3D, and see exactly where this force manifests. This means that this balancing force, just like all the rest of the vibrational spectrum, is engineerable. That means it's possible to do a type of vibrational engineering with these energies. And although they may have had a different frame of reference in the ancient world they were masters of vibrational engineering in China, in Egypt, in other cultures around the world. So Dr. Karim, in asking the question, what's that energy in the center? He identified that one of the 3 energies is what he called the higher harmonic of gold. This is the exact same vibratory energy as what you see around the heads or the bodies of the saints in every tradition. It's not a metaphor. It's an actual vibrational force. There are ways this can be engineered and activated, and they use this all the time in the ancient world. So the French, in their work in the 1930s, identified the way that the 12 bands of vibration that they had detected, which are all of the polarized energies in the world, all the things that create one specific power. It's hot versus cold. It's light versus dark. These different specialized powers of the 12 then correspond with what Dr. Karim found with the one quality in the center, the centering vibration, which has no opposite. It's the connection to the original unified source. It's unity. And what we have then is an exquisite system in which that energy of unity in the center then manifests into physical space and specific activity by taking on energies of specific bands of the 12 bands. That's probably the tightest condensation I can give to you for the concept of the vibrational spectrum. So Dr. Karim found that this higher harmonic of gold energy was one of the 3 energies in the center vibration. And then he began to reverse engineer all types of designs and architecture and tools used in ancient cultures to show the way that they consciously engineered them to concentrate and direct this centering vibration, as well as the other vibrations in the complete spectrum identified by the French. Dr. Karim advanced this work so far that by the early 1990s in Egypt, certain people in the Egyptian government, because Ibrahim's from a very noble family in Egypt, knew about his work. And they invited him to demonstrate the power of these vibrations coming from shapes, coming from geometry, at the Egyptian National Research Center. This then led to Dr. Karim successfully demonstrating that he could affect the life functions in living beings through pure shapes. So for example, he put one geometric form over a fast replicating cell culture, left another alone, and showed that the one left alone would replicate normally, very fast replication of cells. The other one went into suspended animation and had no replication of cells until you took the geometry off. Why? Because that created the specific vibration that creates suspended animation. Other vibrations create all types of other functions. Every subtle energy function that exists can be identified and directed through the universal vibrational spectrum. So at the Egyptian National Research Center, when he showed that to the biologist and the chemist and the physicians that were there, they didn't know what to make of it. I have a copy of their research report where they said, we cannot account for this effect with our modern knowledge in science and technology. So they actually created a branch at the Egyptian National Research Center for the study of the effect of geometric forms on life functions. And at that point, Ibrahim then was invited to participate in other things, like the Egyptian National Hepatitis C Research Project. And in the Hepatitis C Research Project, he showed that through the application of just pure shapes, what he refers to as biosignatures, these biosignatures are actual three-dimensional energy movements. And the movement pattern you put the energy into programs the energy to have a specific function. That the two-dimensional shadow of those three-dimensional objects that he would actually trace in the human body, so for example in the human heart, he would be able to trace the movement of vital energy in the heart in a specific movement pattern that he calls a biosignature. And again, every one of these creates a specific vibratory power, in this case for the heart. So one of these energy movement patterns in the heart gets the heart to beat. Another one helps to clean the blood. Another one helps to distribute the blood to a particular part of the body, etc. Dr. Karim makes absolutely no medical claims for this, nor do I. Ibrahim always lets the medical doctors who are part of the research project speak for it. He says, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm an architect, but I can show you the way the vibrations work. So for the National Hepatitis C Research Project, the doctors that ran the project at the end had to say that, well, we had a whole group of people with Hep C that were given interferon. Another group was given some type of herbal remedy. Other people got other things. But one particular group of 300 people got no treatment whatsoever, except a medallion that had some of these shapes on it. And Dr. Karim had identified which of the biosignatures to use for people with Hep C. Not only were they ones for the liver, as you might expect, but to get the right alchemical effect, you have to add others that are related to the immune system, to the heart, etc. Now this is the kind of thing that we teach in the Biogeometry Foundation and Advanced Training, that I was very fortunate that Dr. Karim allowed me to assist him in creating the standardized format for that we now teach in North America. So after they completed the project, they had to admit that by far the best result was for the people who simply got this medallion with these strange little squiggly shapes on it. And for their mindset, it made no sense whatsoever. So it was the people that got the biosignature medallions that had an average 90% normalization of enzyme levels. And some of them got clean blood work at the end. We asked Ibrahim, how come some people got clean blood work and some didn't? He said, because the only thing we did is we gave them the medallion to wear. We weren't allowed to work on their environment. If we had been able to work on their home, I could have gotten more cases of that. Because they're being exposed to all these toxic vibrations in their environment and in their home. We have to correct the earth energy lines. We have to correct the electromagnetic fields, things of that kind, the things that tear down the immune system. Another thing that we teach in the biogeometry training. So, some of you have heard about Dr. Karim's work before. For some of you, this is the first exposure. Now we're all caught up. I want to mention for everybody that I was with Ibrahim just about a little over a week ago in Montreal, where they had a biogeometry conference, and Dr. Karim released the first public book on biosignatures. Until now, it had only been in the biogeometry trainings. But now this book called Biogeometry Signatures is now available, and I was able to get a few copies to bring here for those that are interested in it. So this is the first time that all of these biosignatures are described, and the background to them is described, and then all of these different patterns are shown, including the right way to construct them. This is a huge topic in itself. I won't go further on this tonight. There's another book that also came out that I brought a few copies of, created by his daughter, Dorea, who also teaches biogeometry. And it's Biogeometry Signatures, a mandala coloring book. So with this, one of the ways to get the biosignature energy into your energy field is to make the actual physical movement like you're drawing them. But coloring them has the same effect. You are literally making the movement with your body. In fact, when we were with Dr. Karim in Montreal, one thing he'd have us do would be to make movements with the entire body, where we moved in the patterns of certain biosignatures with the entire body. We'd sometimes jokingly refer to it as Egyptian Qigong. And it would activate some of these particular patterns. So making the movement pattern can get it into your field. And what they said is it's very hard to be able to link those biosignatures to other patterns to make a mandala, because it's all an energy movement circuit. And if you don't move the circuit properly, you'll just lose all the beneficial energy from it. So they put quite a bit into this to find the patterns. So that's some of the recent things with the work of Dr. Karim. I also wanted to mention that in his work of working on both the human energy field as well as environments, one of the things that he developed was what he called the home kit. And the home kit is based around, I haven't unwrapped these, but they're cubes, and the cubes are covered with specific shape information based on his research. And so the home kit comes in a single cube or in a triple cube kit, and the cubes are put out in an open space in an environment, and they form a radiating network of energy between them to help to damp down the multiple toxic energy sources in the environment, the electromagnetic fields, toxic earth energy lines, etc. It helps to create a stabilizing, balancing force in that particular environment. They come with a little brochure that tells you more about applying them, and there's some other pieces that come in it that you can apply directly to electrical devices, water sources, etc. But the key thing is whether it comes with the one with the 3 cubes, which are placed at least 10 feet apart in a space to create this overfield of the BG3 energy, or the single cube, which can also work in a space, not as powerful as the 3 cubes, and also these can be traveled with. They can be taken on a plane, they can be put in a hotel room, things of that kind. Now, to actually be able to do the vibrational testing work, and I'll be doing more description and explanations and demonstrations for the weekend class, this requires the use of particular types of pendulums. The French had developed some, but Dr. Karim improved the design of them. So now to detect the more beneficial waves in every one of the 12 bands, what's referred to as horizontal waves, which tend to be more beneficial, there's a particular type of pendulum that has the 12 bands marked on it, and you can move the pointer on the pendulum to any one of those bands. That creates an angle on the pendulum that now it's tuned to detect a specific vibrational quality. When the pendulum is moved over the item that does not have the energy, it doesn't have any pull on the pendulum. But if it's over an item that does have that vibration, then the pendulum is pulled into a rotation. And this then allows you to do vibrational spectrum analysis. So you can test any person, place, or thing for what energies are within it just by tuning the pointer on the dial to the vibration you're looking for. Then there's another one that's used, has 2 dials on it, and they now sell them in this little package along with a brochure that tells you how to use it. And this is for testing the detrimental vibrations within every band. Now, the full training in this is in Dr. Karim's biogeometry work for how you work with the centering vibration. So with these types of pendulums, the ones I just showed you are used to detect the 12 different bands. But to detect the centering vibration, he developed a different form of pendulum. Its design is actually similar, although not identical to, some forms you've seen from ancient Egypt, with the use of the stacked discs. Now there's an aspect of the shapes, an aspect of the number of discs, and the resonance of the disc shape itself that goes beyond what we can describe tonight. But the upshot being that if you test something that has a field of this centering vibration, then moving the pendulum in a straight back and forth search position over it, the pendulum is pulled into a rotation over the item. And the strength of the rotation shows you how strong the field is. There's much more to this, but I'm giving you basically the simple upshot of how this works. Now with Dr. Karim's work, he was the one that identified the centering vibration. Brilliant work. And all kinds of different ways that this can be used to design anything, or be applied to the human energy field, or to balance the energy of land, or to transmute detrimental energy from all types of vibrational sources, earth energy lines, electromagnetic fields, all kinds of things, into something highly beneficial. So Ibram has spent his entire life, he's been working for more than 40 years, on identifying the centering vibration and ways to apply it, and how it was also done in the ancient world. Brilliant work, and that's what is in the biogeometry trainings. But what he doesn't focus on, because he's focused completely on the centering vibration, is he doesn't teach much about or do much research with the 12 bands. So from my perspective, I became very fascinated with the 12 bands. Ibram's done a masterwork with the centering vibration. But the 12 bands, I felt there was a huge amount of work that was given out by the French that I was finding in the translation project from their text, where they were describing the use of these vibrations in ancient Egypt, in China, in India, in Easter Island, in all kinds of ancient cultures. And their observations in these texts are absolutely stunning. for how they knew to generate these vibrations and then project them. They could use it from anything from powerful spiritual activations to profound healing to projecting extremely toxic and deadly vibrations. That unless you're trained in an energetic science like Chinese medicine, a Western medical doctor will never even know what happened to the person because they won't see the blockages that it creates. They won't see the effects on the energy flows or how it changes the vibratory forces in the body at certain energy centers. So what I wanted to do is, because Abraham had really anchored this work with the centering vibration, is I wanted to make sure the work with the 12 bands didn't get lost. And so I've been doing work now for years in being able to identify exactly what power is in each of the 12 bands. What's its function? Here's my thought about it. Every one of these 12 bands is a divine power from the unified source, from the Godhead, from a divine beginning that has to do with all the subtle energies that create life and life functions in the world. These are the subtle energies, the complete spectrum of them. With that, these means that these are all specific divine powers. Each one of the bands has a divine power. So I've spent years in researching in the French text and in many other bodies of work, as well as doing my own research over the last 15 years to identify exactly what power each band has. I've published a lot of that research in the online class called the Universal Vibrational Spectrum. That's in the Vibrational Testing and Healing series that's in your handout. Now, what I'm doing for the weekend class is, for the first time, I'm teaching a live weekend class where I'm going to give people and describe in detail many of the core powers, not with as much detail as in the complete online class, but with a lot of the information about exactly what these different vibrational qualities are for each band. And I created a handout for the weekend class that is 65 pages and covers a huge amount of information. So on the weekend, those doing the weekend class, we're going to talk about what's the power of each one of these bands and how it works. So in working with this whole concept of the universal vibrational spectrum, this then brings us to understanding the powers that are inherent in vibrations for things like vibrational healing, vibrational medicine. And one of the great references that we use today for this is the field of cymatics. Now, in cymatics work, I've got in the weekend class, I have all types of information about cymatic sound vibrations. On the front page here, the picture that you see right there is actually a cymatics pattern. This comes from the work of a Swiss scientist named Hans Jenny, and many of you are probably familiar with cymatics. Cymatics shows you how sound vibrations shape matter. So for example, if you have powder on a flexible membrane, or you have a liquid or a paste or an oil, or all these things that, not coincidentally, also correspond to certain substances in the human body, and you then apply a vibration to it, then that vibration, as soon as the sound hits the material is free enough to form into a specific shape, a specific mandala like this. And what you see in the cymatics work is that the moment you change the sound vibration, the visible shape changes. If you go to YouTube, there are all kinds of free videos on YouTube showing you Hans Jenny's original work, showing you a lot of modern stuff. People are even using this to create specific geometric patterns in fire. It's really quite remarkable. But it has to do with the way that sound vibrations shape matter. And what this means is if you can find the right sound vibration, you can find exactly the sound vibration that will resonate matter to create a specific function, including in living beings. So one of the things I'm going to get into on the weekend, and you'll find some information on in the online articles on my website, is that from the work of Hans Jenny, where he was able to identify all of these powerful vibrations and the shapes they create, and I want to mention to you that one of the things he discovered is that when you apply the sound vibration, it'll take the two-dimensional surface of the liquid, the paste, the powder, etc., immediately form a perfect mandala. But he found if you take 5 vibrations and you combine 5 vibrations together, then you could get the powder on the plate to come together, rise up vertically, and move like a living being. And there's pictures of this in his films. So it's with the combinations of sound vibrations. One alone is not going to give you the full effect. You have to have the right combination of the vibrations together. And again, you can see this in the Yeni films. So the second one is pain musculoskeletal. Third one is pain inflammatory. The eighth is related to aspects of the heart, the glandular system. 9 is related to the digestive system, and 10 is related to various types of detoxification. So I have a little story about this, which is that what I've prepared for my presentation at the International Cymatics Conference in Atlanta in a week from now is I've been testing different materials. So we're going to talk in just a moment about vibrations and different natural materials like stones, plants, animals, etc. We have a huge problem today that all types of stones are being artificially treated to make them look more attractive. But some of those treatments make the stones incredibly toxic to wear. So the worst of the treatments, and I'm going to go into detail on the weekend about the various treatments, how to spot them, etc. The worst of the treatments is the one that's irradiation of the stone with gamma radiation. Now, you wouldn't want yourself to be irradiated with gamma radiation, but they irradiate the stone with gamma radiation because they say, oh, it's not radioactive afterwards. If you use a Geiger counter, you don't pick anything up. But vibrationally, energetically, very toxic from this. Why do they do it? Because it makes the color much brighter, or it'll change the color to one that has more commercial value. But rarely will they tell you it's been irradiated. And this is accepted in gemological circles. They say as long as the color change is permanent, it's fine to irradiate it all day. So one of the challenges I've been having is finding all these stones. Some people will pay thousands of dollars. Maybe they get the stone for Jyotish, the Indian method of using stones for health and to counteract certain constitutional issues, etc. And they may have paid $4,000 for what looks like a great stone that would be used in Indian Jyotish for this purpose. You test it, it's full of detrimental vibrations that you can pick up in a second with these vibrational testing tools I've been describing. And then how do you clear it? Well, I tried everything under the sun, and I couldn't get it cleared until I found one thing, and that is putting it on the vibrating base plate of this device when it's on channel 10. That's the only thing I found that will take that detrimental vibrational imprint out of a stone that's been irradiated. And I've tried literally 100 other ways to do it. Quite remarkable that that's the effect it has on the stone and the material. It also contains some of the other subtle body adjustment things that Dr. Manners came up with, etc., in channel 10. Now, along with this work in getting the Cymatics vibrational healing out to the general public in a form where anybody could get it and use it, or use it in a spa where people can come in and just do it for an hour or something like that, there's the aspect of it that it creates a specific audible sound vibration when you use it, and that creates a vibratory force that comes through the gel pads, up through the human body, and affects the different functions and structures. Now also in cymatic circles today, there's been other work in developing cymatics imaging. So again, I'll give more details on the weekend, but there's an app that you can buy for the Android or iOS mobile devices that's called Cymoscope. And the Cymoscope, you can put it on an iPad, you can put it on a cell phone, etc. It has something here that allows you to show the way that different tones will create different cymatic patterns, just like the original cymatics work of Hans Jenny. The Cymoscope? C-Y-M-A, scope. So this was developed by a friend of mine in Britain named John Stuart Reed. And on this, and this is just the one you can download for $9.99 on your Android or iOS device, it's got a thing where you can play the different notes. Now this is not like a graphic visualizer. It's not just showing you some wild, trippy pattern that goes along with the sound. It actually is the cymatics pattern, because John Stuart Reed had created a very expensive and very involved device called the Cymoscope, and he then encoded this so that the same vibration would create the pattern that he then recorded in his lab with a Cymoscope that could cost $50,000, $100,000. Now it also has a function where you can hit a microphone on it, and when you hit the microphone, it will then show you the specific cymatic pattern of any source. So I know it's hard for people in the back to see it. At the weekend, I'll have this out for people who can see it during the day. But what it shows you here is that it shows you in real time the vibrations coming from this and the specific cymatics sound vibration pattern that it creates. So this is the kind of things we'll be doing at the Cymatics conference in Atlanta. There's a lot of remarkable work there. Now I want to mention one other thing. One of the people that's working in Europe with the Cymatics developers in the United States and elsewhere in the world is a man who's not well known here. He's from Romania. His name is Gabriel Kellerman. Gabriel Kellerman has done remarkable work where I was able to get just a few copies of this book. It's very expensive. It's like $130. And I was only able to get it because one of my friends is Jeff Volk. Jeff Volk is the guy who got the Cymatics book by Hans Jenny into English. And he knows all these Cymatics researchers around the world and people that come to the Cymatics conference. So in this particular text by Gabriel Kellerman, it has just a huge number of amazing illustrations of all types of vibrational sound patterns and how all types of natural structures are created based on these patterns. It's particularly strong in working with things like vortex patterns and with toroidal energy movement patterns. It shows how that helps to manifest forces in the human body, structures of the face, structures of the cellular tissue in the body. It's absolutely remarkable. And I have some of these also that are in the handout for the weekend. I want to see if I can find this one particular one to show you. So this goes into some very, very deep work showing the effect of these sound patterns to create all natural structures. So for those of you that have a background in sacred geometry, some of the patterns here are very advanced. They have to do not only with healing at a high level, but also with all types of energy movement and technology, including some advanced spiritual practices of certain energy flows in the human energy field created in higher internal alchemy. So it's quite a remarkable book. I was only able to get a handful. I have a few here. And again, this is all related to the Cymatics work. So what I'd like to go to now is saying a little bit about the use of this type of vibrational testing, this type of understanding of these vibrational forces, to then be able to do analysis with what are natural sources of vibration in the world around us. So what I've started moving into, once I was able to isolate specific qualities and powers of the 12 bands and do testing on different things, was then to apply this to then see what invisible, subtle energies are coming from specific minerals or stones, particular plants, particular animal parts, sometimes used medicinally in Chinese medicine or biodynamic agriculture, etc. So I want to mention about a few of these. When we work with stones and the vibrations of stones, now we're on the bottom part here of our front handout, we need to be aware that stones are the most stable form of vibration in the world. Maybe you work with plants for healing, that's great, but how long will the plant hold potency? Once it's been prepared, it may be for some months, maybe for some years. But stones can hold the same vibration for millions of years. Stones are the most stable form of the crystallization of higher divine vibrations into the physical plane. That was understood by every classical tradition on the planet, because they all use stones for spiritual and healing purposes. So this means that there's something to the use of stones and minerals, often far beyond what we find in modern popular books on the subject. They can allow us to access some very, very high forces. So this means we need to reclaim the lost knowledge of the use of these stones and apply that in modern times. Now, one of the best developments in recent times for getting some of the ancient stone knowledge out in a very deep form, far beyond what we had in North America before, is the work of a Daoist teacher in North America whose name is Jeffrey Yuan. Yuan is Y-U-E-N. Jeffrey Yuan is a wonderful Daoist teacher that covers the whole gamut of Daoist healing practices. But one thing that he's really brought back is the concept of stone medicine. And it's hardly known today in the West that the Daoist tradition in China had as fully developed a stone medicine as they have a plant medicine. Because the only thing we got in North America was the plant medicine. Why? Because it was similar to our use of pharmaceutical drugs. The stone medicine, completely ignored. So Jeffrey Ewan has helped to bring this work back of the deep Daoist knowledge. And mostly you have to go to live classes with him to get this knowledge, because he does the classic Daoist thing of just oral transmission. But some of his students are starting to make books about the work or to teach the work secondarily. I've studied with multiple people that he's taught. I've studied with him directly. I have found the texts that people have published that were his students. And one book I had mentioned to you, there's the book published just this year called Stone Medicine. And so a book called Stone Medicine, I believe the author's name is Leslie Franks. That book is the first thing in print in English describing some of the teachings of Jeffrey Ewan. I expect there to be others. There's some very, very deep knowledge there. So the challenge of it is that some of this material, you need to have a background in Chinese medicine to understand what he's talking about. But the information is very, very deep, and I'm doing my best now with some of the vibrational work to get some of the things he's teaching to a larger audience in a simplified form. And what I'm doing is when he indicates things, in the classes I've taken with him or the people I've worked with who've worked with him, they talk about the certain powers of some stones. We'll go through a number of those in the weekend seminar. And what I then do is I use my own direct vibrational testing to see exactly what vibrational bands are coming from the stones that are related to this, and can also help to inform other possible uses of that particular stone. Now, one thing I'll talk about on the weekend is some of the work of Marcel Vogel. And those of you that know about Marcel Vogel knew that he was a brilliant IBM scientist who did great work with crystals in the 1980s. He died in the early 90s. And Marcel Vogel's work had to do with the right way to be able to cut a crystal so it would have a specific type of resonance to it. Now, the tragedy, and Marcel himself used to lament this. I remember when I would take classes with him back in the 80s. He would lament the fact that they are now selling on the market all kinds of things that are poorly cut crystals to be double terminated and calling them Vogel crystals. He'd say these things don't have energy anywhere near a Vogel crystal. They're not cut properly at all. You have to cut the crystal along its axis of growth, because that's the way of the natural energy conduction. All these cheap crystals that are on the market today being called Vogel crystals, and they're being mass cut in Brazil. They're not cut along the proper energy axis, and they're not cut with the proper methods. There are still people who are trained by Marcel Vogel that are cutting and selling these things, including the guy that I do my cutting for me in California, whose name is Drew Towsley. And so this is a real Vogel crystal, cut the way that Vogel intended, an 8-sided Vogel crystal, and it has to have specific angles in it that were angles that Marcel found would actually resonate the internal matrix of the crystal, which, by the way, also resonate the interior of the water molecule. So the crystal and the water molecule's inner lattice are deeply connected at particular angles. And so by vibrating that has a very strong effect on the life energy of the body that just any random so-called Vogel cut with double termination does not have. Plus he worked on the particular way that they would be designed to help to take human thought and manifest it into energy, transformation of thought to energy. And that's where you can see a picture of Marcel Vogel's work. And this is actually on the cover of the downloadable manual for my online How to Use Crystals and Gemstones class, of the image that he created with a liquid crystal surface that had no image on it, and he meditated on it for about 45 minutes. And at the end of the 45 minutes, there's a picture of the outline of the Blessed Mother in the liquid crystals, because he was a Catholic. It shows the way he could imprint a mental image in the liquid crystal. Same way as today, you can send electrical impulses into electrocrystals to see images on electronic devices. So this is the form of the Vogel crystal. Again, we'll go into more detail in the weekend, but I want to contrast that and make clear the difference between it and a master-cut prana crystal. Now, the prana crystal is based on the design given out by Master Choa Kok Sui from the pranic healing tradition. And in pranic healing, they do a lot of bioenergy projection of energy. And with that, they didn't want the back termination when they're projecting energy out the front. Now that's when they are using it to pull toxic energy out of the human body, because then as you're pulling the toxic energy out, you may get a spray of the energy out of the back termination. So I want you to be clear about the difference between that design and the pranic healing design used by pranic healers who might work on people's energy fields with bioenergy for 6 to 8 hours a day. And then when they extract the toxic energy out of a person's field, it doesn't come out the back end the same way. And they use crystals very commonly in pranic healing for this purpose because it allows the person to work for much longer and not get the toxic energy from the client in their own field, and it makes the work much more powerful. And this is actually cut also by Marcel's master cutter, who I get things cut by. And what I found is that by combining some of the Vogel methods and cutting with some of the information from biogeometry and other vibrational testing, such as the power of the number 16, power of the number 19, get these crystals with 16 or 19 facets, then you get a sweet spot of energy that is extremely powerful. Then there's the aspect of the different types of vibrational qualities that are held in the stones. And I want to just mention for a moment, because I know we're getting close to time here, I want to mention about an idea that I found with the vibrational work, which is Dr. Karim had found the energy of the center, what he calls the BG3. The French had found the energy of the 12 bands, which I've been working with to identify the power or application of each one. And so what I found in testing plant formulas is that the plants that are called adaptogens, and adaptogen is a term coming from Israel Breckman in Russia from around 1973. An adaptogen herb, what the Chinese would call a master tonic herb, when you test it, it has a very strong centering vibration, along with other bands being present that show you more about specific function. But why are they master tonic herbs? Sometimes called double directional herbs, meaning you could apply them whether there's an excess or deficit in the energy field, because they have so much of the centering vibration that connects it, balances it in the center. And I realized that from the herbology work, they describe the way that these master tonic herbs are a very small percentage of the plants that exist in the world. So very, very small number of all the plants in the world are these master tonic herbs. So I realized the same thing would be true for stones, but nobody ever approached stones the same way. So that raised the question, what were the master tonic stones? What were the adaptogenic stones? Now that we had a method to test it vibrationally, we could see what stones have unusual amounts of that centering vibration, and that being combined alchemically with these other band qualities. So I'm going to show you just a couple of crystals that I found with this quality, and then again on the weekend I'll talk about many, many other stones and their vibrational qualities found through vibrational testing. One very interesting one is one I refer to as iron rose quartz. Iron rose quartz is deposits of hematite, natural iron, inside of rose quartz. This particular stone only comes from one deposit in Madagascar. And what you find with this is that if you test hematite, natural iron, and in Chinese medicine and stone medicine, they are wild about hematite, because hematite has a fantastic effect. Iron has a great effect, that it pulls the energy in the human system that can begin to build up in the chest and the head and cause all types of health problems. It pulls it down to where it needs to go in the lower abdomen, what they call the lower dantian. So that's one of the effects of iron. But if you test hematite, iron, naturally, there's not a strong centering vibration with it. And then rose quartz, beautiful stone, full of rose or pink vibration. And again, the thing, though, that rose quartz is not full of this centering vibration. And also, people sometimes think, oh, the color of rose quartz comes from iron, the way that, for example, amethyst gets its purple color from iron. But actually, that's not true. That's published in old books, but recent research shows that rose quartz does not get its color from iron. Instead, it gets its color from these incredible little fine hairs of a mineral that had never previously been identified until they did the electron scanning microscopes to begin to perceive these fine hairs. And they look like beautiful pink rose-colored hairs under magnification. I have pictures of it in the handout for the weekend. And so it's not iron that gives it the colors, these incredible little rose hairs all through it. So in this place in Madagascar, nature alchemically merged the iron, the hematite, with the rose quartz and developed this particular stone. And when it combined them, it got very, very strong centering vibration that neither stone alone has. Now, this is the great thing about alchemical design. You can get multiple components that don't have a particular vibrational band or don't have strong centering vibration, but if you combine them properly, bam, an alchemical change where you now have very strong centering vibration and sometimes potentially new bands that never existed before. So the effect of this iron rose quartz is that it creates a strengthening, balancing effect in the human energy field, pulls the energy down that's stuck up too high in the body, down to the lower abdomen, the way the iron does, but balances the energy field at the same time with the much greater amount of the centering vibration, and at the same time adds in this heart resonance and energy with the rose quartz. So this is an adaptogenic stone. Gives you one example. Now, the problem with this that I'm going to talk about on the weekend is that most of this stone that's sold today has all been artificially heated and has taken away a huge amount of its benefit. Sometimes when I test it, like 90% of its benefit's gone because it's artificially heated, and it looks much brighter red when it's artificially heated. That's why they heat it. It's like, oh, look how red this is. Why would you want that when you can get that? Well, the reason is that this is full of beneficial vibrations. The other stuff has been killed. Now, this is why I'm trying to teach people how to do this type of vibrational testing for themselves, because you don't really know until you test it vibrationally for yourself. Now, here's a variant on it. This is the real thing, the one that hasn't been heated. Most of it on the market, over 90%, is all heated today. So you got to be careful. But here's a variant on it, and this is the golden form of it. Why is it yellow? Because it has more water in it. It still has that strong centering vibration, but now its energy has been shifted more toward the yellow band from the red band. And when that happens, one of the effects of this is that with the extra water in it, what it does is that it moves the chi energy in the body much faster because of the water held inside of it. So this will circulate the energy faster. But this has a bit more vital force in it. So you get these differentiations from the way that the stone has formed. And once you begin to understand the vibrational language behind it, it becomes very self-evident. That's the way it would have to be. Another stone that I really like is one called indigo gabbro. Indigo gabbro is sold mostly commercially under the name Mystic Merlinite, and when it's sold under the name Mystic Merlinite, the price is usually about 4 times higher. But the original name of it is indigo gabbro. And it's indigo because it's kind of purpley, and it's gabbro because gabbro is an incredible mineral that's similar to basalt. And what's amazing about it is that the foundation of the world's oceans, what's beneath the world's oceans, is gabbro. This is a specific type of this basaltic type of stone, gabbro, again from one specific location in Madagascar that I believe is a sacred power spot because of its energy. It fused together all these different minerals into the gabbro deposit and created extremely strong centering vibration. Now when I test it, I not only find the strong centering vibration, but what I also find with it is that it has very strong energy of indigo and violet. Indigo, as I'll talk about this weekend, is one of the rarest of the vibrations. You rarely find it. In natural sources, indigo vibration tends to break down very quickly into other energies. So to find stable sources of the indigo vibration, it's the rarest of all the 12 bands. And when there's something alchemical, has to do with transmutation in that indigo band. And when you combine it with the violet band, like it is in this stone when you test it energetically, it doesn't look violet, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it's the vibration coming off of it. The combination of the centering vibration with the indigo and the violet gives it the capacity to absorb toxic vibrations out of the human body, out of a location, out of an item, and not just store that toxic energy in it the way other stones that we'll talk about on the weekend will, such as obsidian or some other dark stones that soak up toxic energy and then have to be discharged. This one, up to a certain level, can absorb toxic energy and do a type of transmutation where you can pick up the toxic vibration it's taking out of a toxic system and then check it a little bit later. The toxic vibration is gone and now it has more of that centering vibration coming out. It can literally transmute the detrimental vibration. It does it better than any other stone I've identified for that transmutation of detrimental vibration to beneficial. So it's called indigo gabbro. I use the slab type form for putting on the top of wireless routers, toxic earth energy lines, electromagnetic sources, putting things on top of because it's a flat, polished surface. I use the obelisk form to create a standing pillar of that vibration in a location. And applications of that will have to wait for the class on the weekend. But creating a standing wave of that vibration location can be quite beneficial. And then there's a polished form of it that's used as a palm stone, held in the body, put on the body. Now, for time purposes, I'm not going to talk about other stones. I just want to mention one other one that's really fascinating, and that is aquamarine. Aquamarine is referred to in Chinese as the pillar stone. It is a stone that is known in Chinese internal alchemy for being used at 3 different stages of alchemical transformation of the human energy and consciousness system. Now, what's fascinating about this, again, I'll get into it on the weekend, is that there's been recent scientific research talking about inside of beryl stones. Beryls are a class of stones, and aquamarine is a beryl. But they actually found this and identified it in aquamarines. That within aquamarine, inside the beryls, is a state of matter that's supposed to not exist in the physical world. It's called quantum tunneling, where particles of matter can exist in multiple states and locations at the exact same time. And I believe this is directly related to indications from the Chinese Daoist tradition about this being an alchemical stone, because it seems to have an aspect of its forces are in multiple locations at once in a way that the scientific articles say cannot exist in the physical world. It's a purely quantum phenomena. So if you're not coming to the weekend, you can do a search on the web for aquamarine, beryl, quantum tunneling, that sort of thing. Now I think at this point, I'd better quit while I'm behind, there where we are time-wise. And let me open it up to a few quick questions people may have before we end for the evening. Yes, please?
If there wasn't perhaps authentic, have you looked at those shapes as an indication of what may be happening there?
Great question. The main thing I would say is that for both of those, and really for any other type of vibrational phenomena, what we have is the capacity to directly test to see what the energy is that is present with it. So rather than my making an abstract statement about it, the work that I would do with it is I would take a product said to radiate tachyon, and I would test it for its qualities of the centering vibration and the 12 bands. Then I would start testing it. This is another methodology I'll talk about on the weekend we haven't talked about here, using the French method that allows me to test that vibration and see how it affects all the different organs, glands, things of that kind in the human body. That would give me some sense of the actual effect of the tachyon energy, exactly what vibrations it creates. And the same thing is true for crop circles. All the crop circles will create particular vibrational forces coming from it. And that way you can detect what that vibration is. And then in more advanced work, that again we haven't talked about tonight, you can test that vibration on different planes. And so physical plane, energetic plane, emotional, mental, higher spiritual planes. And you could actually know on what level that vibration is primarily active. So that would give you a direct read on exactly what it's doing or how it's affecting the location and the people vibrationally. Also, with that particular type of crop circle on the land, it'll normally get its energy conducted through the local energy lines, the earth lines, and start conducting through the area, so you can test the effect on the local area of that as well. Yes, please.
I'd like to know if the Cynoscope program, it also, when it's showing you, will it show you non-beneficial energy forms?
No, it'll show you any cymatic vibrational mandala coming from the sound it's picking up. But it does not do anything to differentiate if it's beneficial or detrimental. It'll simply show you the pure pattern of that sound vibration. Okay? But it'll do it for any sound. You could sing into it and see what form your voice creates, for example. Yes?
How do you spell Hans Jannik's last name?
Hans Jenny? Jenny is with a J. J-E-N-N-Y. Hans Jenny. But in German it's pronounced like a Y. In the back, yes sir?
Is there any connection between the entheogenic plants and the vibrations?
And the what band?
Like magic mushrooms or ayahuasca, those kind of plants.
Yes, absolutely. So this gets into a thing about looking at the specific vibrational band and on what plane it's manifesting on, and with the particular vertical and horizontal waves. So for many types of hallucinatory plants, they are a poison, and so there's some vertical waves that are present. And you'll then see, in addition to the vertical and horizontal waves within that band, you'll then find it's active on a particular plane. So particularly with these, you find they're very active on higher spiritual planes, but they're also very active on the etheric life energy level. And what that does is it creates an expansion of the etheric life energy in the human body. So the etheric body actually extrudes past the boundaries of the human body further than it normally does, as one action coming from the psychotropic substance. That's one aspect of it. Yes, please.
Can you tell me, what is the name of that indigo mineral again?
It's called indigo gabbro, and gabbro is Gabbro. But most of the time you see it sold commercially, it's called mystic merlinite. Mystic merlinite. Yes. Yes, please.
Could you comment on the relationship of cymatics to the homeopathic potentization process, which extracts the vibration from substances?
Yeah, the question is about the homeopathic potentization process connected to cymatics. That gets fairly involved. Of course, with the homeopathic potentization process, what we're doing is we're taking the core vibration and then we are amplifying it further by removing it from its material matrix. So with that, you get certain changes in the vibration as you take the material matter away from it and keep intensifying the core vibration of it. One thing that you find in vibrational testing then of the homeopathic substances is they'll start, as you go to higher and higher potency levels, you'll start seeing shifts on how strong the vibration is on particular planes. It may shift from the physical to the etheric to the astral, etc., as it keeps moving up in potency level. It can also potentially start getting shifts in aspects of the bands that it brings in. Now, we're beginning to see certain types of homeopathic potentization of some substances that take this closer to a shamanic level. So, for example, one thing I'll talk about on the weekend is that in Germany, they're starting to do homeopathic preparations from certain types of animal blood, venoms, things of this kind, like golden eagle blood. This can be taken in and it becomes somewhat psychotropic and consciousness expanding, but you can track some of that through the change on the planes. The cymatics is basically creating a specific vibration that is extremely stable. So we're not taking it through the potentization process to go to other levels. You would actually change the cymatic frequency from one to another to change the level. And with the cymatic vibrational frequencies, what you're getting with this is that direct input of the coherent acoustic wave into the body to resonate a specific gland, organ, etc. And with that particular function of the sound to create the vibration, there's an aspect of this that it does it in a way that is energetically different to an electromagnetic device. So this is a little bit involved, but I'll try to really chunk it down. When you get an electromagnetic device and you're putting an electromagnetic frequency in a human body for a healing purpose, other than some extremely low microcurrents put into the human body for the healing of tissue and tendons, etc., most electromagnetic healing devices, and this is just my theory on it, not everybody would agree with this, but this is my theory, the electromagnetic healing device is creating with a frequency generator a specific electromagnetic frequency that actually is not giving you the primary benefit at the level of the electromagnetic energy. It's doing it by creating a parallel activation of the etheric energy level that parallels that part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The same quality of energy, but not at the electromagnetic. You're using the electromagnetic to help to stimulate the etheric aspect of the same vibration. The etheric aspect of the vibration, I believe, is what creates the true healing power of it in the human body. Now, this then leads to another aspect where some people generate homeopathic potencies through the use of an electronic device versus doing it with an actual physical substance. And I found a parallel between the additional enhanced energy you get if you actually make the homeopathic substance by potentizing a physical material rather than doing it with an electronic device. That's similar to the enhanced energy you get using the Cymatics device to give you a coherent sound wave to create the healing or activation of the body versus an electromagnetic frequency. So with that being the case, just one last pointer for those of you that are into aspects of electromagnetic waves, etc. A key to this is that electromagnetic waves are transverse waves, meaning that they activate a movement of material that is perpendicular to their line of movement. So that's why we say the magnetic component is perpendicular to the electrical component. And that type of transverse wave is very different from a sound wave, which is a longitudinal wave, meaning that it's displacing matter parallel to its movement. So with this, the upshot being, I prefer the sound wave and the creation of the homeopathic substance from a physical material rather than through the electronic analog. Although the others can work, they don't have some of the richness of the vibratory matrix when I test it that these sound sources and homeopathic material sources have. I'm going to need to wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I'll see some of you at the class tomorrow.